Hello, friends. Justin Randolph again, pastor Zion Hill Baptist Church in Sevierville, Tennessee, located at 206 Zion Hill Church Road here in Sevierville. Glad to be with you today as we continue looking at some devotional studies and thoughts on the book of Genesis. Today we find ourselves in Genesis chapter 16. In Genesis 15, we saw God reiterate and make a covenant with Abraham, a covenant, a binding agreement, where God said unconditionally that he would meet the arrangements of the agreement. He would take care of all of it, and that Abram just needed to trust in him. When we come to Genesis 16, it had been 10 years since God's original promise that he made to Abram that he would make him a great nation, and that through him he would be a blessing to all peoples, and that multitudes would come from him, but still there was no children in Abram's family. And so Abram and Sarai his wife began to become impatient, and they wanted to move things along at their own way, in their own way, and at their own rate. And that's what we find in Genesis 16. Let's just read together the first 4 verses, shall we? Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go in to my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And so he went in to Hagar, and she conceived. She had a son. His name was Ishmael. And because of the relationship that Hagar and Abram now had, Sarah and Hagar's relationship became strained, and Hagar runs away. But God finds her, and God says, "I'll take care of you and provide for you and your son, and he also will be a great nation." And she calls the name of God El Roi, the God who sees. Just a few observations from this chapter quickly. Number one, God gives no timetables on his promises. God makes many promises, and we can claim them because his promises are sure, but yet he makes no timetable on his promises. They don't happen in the way we want to always have them happen, and they don't happen in the timing we always want them to happen. And so we must remember that God works things out in his timing. It's often been famously said, our God is an on-time God. He is never late, but also, friends, he's never early. He's right on time. Secondly, God doesn't need our ability. God desires our availability. Our availability in the fact that we would trust in him. But God doesn't need us to help him out. Like Sarah came up with this great idea to help God out. Maybe that we could have a surrogate child through Hagar, and that could be the child of blessing. But my friends, God does not require us to help him. No matter what we try to do to give God a hand or lend him aid, we find many times that this causes us more harm than good, and his promises take longer, not shorter, to come about because we've inserted ourselves and gotten ahead of God. No, God doesn't need our ability, but he certainly desires our availability. Thirdly, God's way is the only way. Friend, we live in a culture of Oprah theology. You get salvation, and you get salvation, and you get salvation. My friend, it doesn't work that way. That's called the doctrine of universalism. It assumes that God doesn't care. My friend, God does care. He's very specific in how he relates to us, how he shows us who he is, and how he shows us how we can be in a relationship with him, and how we can obtain salvation. In John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." My friends, we have a exclusive faith. It's available to everyone, but it's not automatic. And it only comes through forgiveness of sins, through faith in Jesus Christ. Not by our works, but by grace we've been saved through faith. This is not as ourselves. This is a gift of God. It's not of works, lest any man should boast. And lastly, God is always watching us. As Hagar runs away, she finds that God sees her. And my friends, wherever you are today, whatever circumstance you face, whatever you're going through, whatever's troubling you, I want you to know today, God sees you, God knows you, and God is able. Nothing is impossible with God, and all things are possible through Christ who gives us strength. God bless you today. I hope you're well, and I hope you'll join us again next time as we travel through the book of Genesis together. Until next time, God bless.